passing a newsstand in the summer of '57, and there on the front page was a picture of Emil. I said, "What the hell is he famous?" I didn't realize who, what? And then I read the subtext, the headline, "Top Soviet Agent."
This is Cold War Conversations. If you're new here, you've come to the right place to listen to first-hand Cold War history accounts. Do make sure you follow us in your podcast app or join our emailing list at coldwarconversations.com. Burt recounts the surreal experience of learning about Fisher's true identity from a newspaper headline, the subsequent FBI interrogations and the emotional court testimony where he struggled to reconcile his friendship with the stark reality of espionage. Burt's journey takes him to Moscow in a failed attempt to reconnect with Fisher. Revealing a labyrinthine world of secrets and paranoia, he shares a heartfelt letter he left for Fisher, expressing regret and longing for a simpler time when art, not intrigue, was their common ground. As a testament to the personal connection they shared, Burt reveals a handcrafted wooden box, a wedding gift made by Fisher himself, symbolizing the genuine human connection that endured despite the shadowy world they navigated. The episode is a poignant exploration of identity, memory, and the complex human relationships that defy the black and white narrative of the Cold War. I'm delighted to welcome Burt to our Cold War conversation.
Anyway, I was about to call the cops, and I got a phone call. And at the other end of the line, he said, "Hello, Burt." And I said, "Emil, where have you been?" And then the explanation came, and he had a heart attack, and he was sent to hospital in Arizona to recuperate. So, and that accounted for the Moscow visit that he made. He was gone for 6 months. But it strikes me again that I suppose in a way I was a little annoyed that he had expressed such confidence in David, to care for his equipment after he was indicted. And also it was something a bit like a disappointment to discover that your lover has been unfaithful. When this young guy turned up who apparently also had a very close relationship with him. The guy's name was Paul Owen. And he appeared and disappeared out of sight, both with the Bernacow book, and no one bothered to question him. I mean, it's clearly possible that his connection with Paul Owen was as intimate and as friendly as anything he had with the guys at the Fulton Street Ovington studio. So that's another little unanswered question. And finally, if you're going to have a category, one of the things about what happened to Hanen was of interest. Whatever his name is, Mackey was his assumed name. The guy who turned him in. At some point, apparently, after the trial, after the testimony, and after or just at the time of the Brinkley film, it was reported that he died in an auto accident. But they decided to run the film anyway because of its importance in the exchange for Gary Powers. And that went to the highest levels here. Kennedy had to approve of it, and the whole schmear going through the whole governmental series. But it was then questioned afterward. Where was the accident? There was no record of the accident on the Pennsylvania and New Jersey highways where it was alleged that he died. And then another story came out that he died of natural causes. well, where did he die of natural causes? In what place? He apparently had a residence in a town in New Hampshire, and it was decided I was going to go track down his death in Keene, New Hampshire, because there would be some record of it. Okay, so I found this little, misbegotten little place in New Hampshire. And I started looking. I went to one hospital, and I said, would there be a record of this man's demise? There should be a coroner's report or a health report record. They couldn't find anything. In fact, they didn't even have a record of his residence there. So talk about spookery. The whole thing may have been literally expunged. That whatever did happen to him was just wiped off the historical record. It's like he never was. And it was, wow. It fit a pattern of thinking about the expediency of any agency that's involved with this kind of work, whether it's counterintelligence or top secret or something of that nature. That the very idea of top secret is itself a precursor to misinformation and to worse, to lie. Wow. So the mystery of old Hanan, he's wiped away. He's gone. And what's left is Willie Fisher, noted artist. This was published in 1999, by the way. After the whole thing with the demise of the Soviet Union, which is interesting that they followed up with this kind of remembrance, and supposedly what would have been called the end of history, as Fukuyama said. You know, that there was no longer this kind of worldwide conflict between the good guys and the bad guys.
Yeah, but I think the FSB, the subsequent organization after the KGB, still hold Willie as one of their heroes alongside Loner and Cohen's as well.
Uh-huh.
I think they were on Soviet postage stamps, as was Willie as well.
Yeah.
So they're still held in high esteem in the Lubyanka, anyway. I wanted to ask you about when you first learned that Emil, or Willie, was a spy. When did you learn about that? It
was, again, passing a newsstand in the summer of '57. And it was I would always check the Times headlines as I walked past. And there on the front page was a picture of Emil. I said, what the hell is he famous? I didn't realize what? And then I read the subtext of the headline, top Soviet agent or something like that. And the whole thing just fell out of disconnect. It was, I mean, the most outrageous movie script that you could write was being written right at that moment. And somebody said, nah, you can't believe that. That's a phony. I mean, that's made up. And it struck most of the people who knew him as being equally extraordinary and unbelievable. So that was the first event. That was my first marriage. And in that summer, I was planning a grand tour of Europe with my newlywed wife. We had neither of us been to Europe. It was going to be a 3-month kind of thing, walking away into the great tradition of tourism and travel. So it came as a big shock because at the moment I worried, am I going to be able to get a passport? And I was waiting for a passport at the time. So it was like everything came crashing down in a dramatic fashion.
I'm presuming you were interviewed by the FBI.
Yes.
How was that?
Okay, first interview was very, very tentative is the wrong word. I was very defensive in a way. I didn't know what they were really after. And I kept saying, maybe they're after a couple of guys in the group who were CP members or Communist Party members. One of them described the American Communist Party as an intellectual coffee clutch, in which a lot of people got together to discuss arcane subjects like political science. I mean, it was hardly the revolutionary subversive organization that McCarthy claimed. But I think that's related to a very specific group. There were one of the people who is involved was a noted, he was a friend also, not of mine much so, but of some of the other people. He was an art director for movies, and was also part of the local CP unit. And he thought I deserved to be in the group. You know, he said, listen, you know, you've committed enough and you have enough. And I was very anxious about it. I really am like a fringe commie, you know. I'm not really in the bag, but not unsympathetic.
Yeah.
And I remember having just read a copy of Bernard Shaw's book on socialism and communism. It was I don't know if you know the title, and I don't even remember it clearly, but I know it contained all of the problems, the difference between socialism and communism, and what was going to be most productive and most counterproductive. So I remember saying, okay, I'll go to this meeting, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but for some stupid reason, I caught Bernard Shaw's copy of his book under my arm, almost like it was a protective shield. And I, of course, never joined the local unit. I found the whole thing kind of uninteresting, to say the least, but I wasn't there. I wasn't in that kind of political commitment. But nevertheless, my interview with the FBI led me to think that there was a contagion effect, that they were after somebody else, or what were they after? And I actually was trying to say, well, I don't, neither of these guys did anything. You know, they were painters who had a certain ideological commitment. And so it was very protective when I was interviewed by the FBI. And then I answered just a few questions, and then I said, you have to tell me what this is all about, because I didn't really know. And I said, if you don't, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. And I left. Turned around, they interviewed me on the street in a car. And I opened the car door, and I was gone. That was, I think that there was a secondary interview, I can't remember it clearly, with much the same results. I said, I have no idea. They asked me about. By that time, I figured, okay, they're really after something else. And I answered questions that gave them absolutely no information. Answered like questions like, who are his friends? Did he have any girlfriends? How often did you meet him? Where did you go? You know, things like that. And I said we had dinner at the local Joe's restaurant down the street. and we went to photograph some night workers at the meat market. And otherwise, we just met at the studio here, and socialized with him outside of that. And at all times, the fact that I made paintings of him was of interest to me in retrospect, because I did admire his physical qualities, the extreme cheekbone and the bird-like kind of look that he had. And also, I enormously admired his playing skills on the guitar. Someone who apparently had only had casual training. It turned out when I read R.B. book, I guess that's the name of the author, Like Father, Like Son, that he had this incredible talent that he often performed when he was a kid, not professionally. And I think the interesting thing is also there's a connection, I think, genetically, or the way the whole gene frame works and the neural transmissions, that people often with mathematical skills often have musical skills as well. So it's a fascinating kind of component of who he was. Oh, one last thing about another little artifact. He came to my wedding. I invited him to come, and he systematically avoided being photographed. I kept looking through all the wedding pictures. I couldn't find them, except there was one strip where he had forgotten to be out of rage. And it was a black and white photograph, and I think it's in the book. They reproduced.
The Burnikoff book.
Yeah, they didn't reproduce the photographs. This book came from the Waterloo Public Library in Waterloo, Iowa. I haven't a clue of how it came into my possession, but there you have it. And as a consequence for the wedding gift, he made a little kind of box for notes and something out of a very expensive wood, put together beautifully with little clasps that he etched out that were handmade little metal clasps that hinge. Again, it's a testament to his personality. He didn't go to shop and buy something. He made something that was very, very real.
Yeah. No, that's great, because all these little anecdotes you're giving me gives more of a richer portrait of Willie than you'd get from a book. These little stories you're giving me are giving me a much broader picture of him, which is great, which is exactly what I've been looking for. I think were the FBI interested in his guitar, and they were asking you about that, and the typewriter?
The typewriter, again, I think I borrowed it because my then newlywed wife was doing a report and she needed something to work on, and I never gave it back to him, actually. That's a whole other story. And the guitar, I can't remember why I had it. I absolutely cannot, except that when I met Donovan and he asked about returning the guitar, I said, and Willie was in Atlanta at that point, I said, tell him it's being taken very good care of. It's being played. And I think I love the idea that it was his instrument that so entranced me.
You said there was an interesting story with the typewriter.
There we go. Thank you. I need help.
That's all right. I'm scribbling down notes. When you say something interesting, I'm following them up. And all of it's interesting. It's lots of notes.
Okay. The trial was set for the summer of 1957. And the FBI came to me and said, do you have any of the material that he loaned to you, like the typewriter and the guitar and everything else? And I said, yes, you can come collect them. And they said, no, it's okay. You hold on to them. So I said, are you sure? I'm going to be gone for 3 months and you won't have access to it in case there's something important in those things that you need. And they said, with the assurance of officialdom, no, don't worry about it, we're fine. And then 2 days later, I got a call from the FBI. Said, we'd like to come by and pick up the typewriter and the guitar. So that being said, I figured, okay, I'm free and clear. You know, I could be away, and we would schedule to come back sometime during the time that the trial was still on. So we're off traveling in Europe, and this is close to 2.5 months. We're 2 weeks away from returning home, and we were robbed by our passport. Money was taken by what was then an ongoing trick in Rome. Okay, it's 57. You know, most of Europe is still recovering. So I went to the U.S. consulate, said our passports were stolen and so on, and we can't go anywhere. So could you get them reissued? And they said, okay, we filled out forms, blah, blah, blah. And waited and waited. This is why I was getting like almost a week, and we were supposed to be going home. And we're sitting in our hotel room feeling gloomy and not wanting to go out. And there's a knock on the door. And I said, who is it? And they said, somebody from the State Department. So I said, oh, great. Our passports are ready, right? They're being delivered. So I opened the door. This guy introduces himself. He said, can I come in? I said, sure, yeah. I said, so do you have the passports? And he said, passports? No, I don't know about passports. I said, well, what the hell are you here for? He said, well, the government wants you to come back to be a witness at the trial of Rudolph Ivanovich Pavlov. And I said, no way. I said, what do you mean you're going to be a witness? I said, we're stuck here. He said, well, we'll take care of the passports, blah, blah. I said, so where do I stand? I said, okay, let's cut the visit short. They're going to pay for us to go back, right? So we'll save on the return fare. And you probably had enough of the museums of Europe, me too, so we'll go home. The odd thing was, the guy said, gee, it's been very hard finding you. And I said, why do you think it's hard finding me? My name is on the ledger of the American Express office in Rome for friends we were expecting to meet us, with a big star I had put next to my name, so that anybody looking for me casually would be able to find. And the guy said, well, I've been looking for you for 2 weeks, right? So I said, QED. So I said, okay, we'll go back. And he said, no, you can't. We only have authorization for one of you. And I said, wait a minute, how did you find out where to look in Rome? I mean, you looked all over Europe. And he said, well, I'm not privileged to tell you that. So I said, listen, I know Emil didn't tell you, so who told you? Anyway, it was not disclosed. And I said, well, I'll just refuse. They said, well, we'll hand you a subpoena tomorrow. So I figured, oh, fuck, all right. I go and I said, well, you know, he was leaving my newlywed young wife here by herself. So he said, we'll assign somebody to keep a lookout for her. I said, oh, great. Just like you looked out for where I was, right? And so my wife said, yeah, you might as well go, and it's okay. So I returned to I subsequently found out they grilled my new father-in-law, who knew where we were, and threatened them with some kind of legal action. So I was brought back. And this is what's a kind of tale of total incompetence, which is no surprise in this whole incident in a way. Because I said, well, what kind of testimony I'm going to be given? And he said, the guy who was transporting, he said, I don't know. You'll have to ask when you get back to the DA's or to the prosecutor's office. So I got back up and I was scheduled to go on the stand the next day. And I still didn't know what the testimony was going to be about. I said, I don't know what you can ask me. I don't know if I can answer honestly or productively or whatever. And they said, we'll let you know. Well, they never did. And suddenly I'm at the courthouse, and it's time for me to go on stand. And what they needed was testimony about the typewriter that I had borrowed. They wanted to confirm that that typewriter was the one he loaned me, and that it was identifiable by witness. And I said, well, I signed papers that, you know, you have a record of, you have a manufacturer's code on it. He said, well, we need live testimony. So I said, you're going to ask me to identify the typewriter. Tell me what the ID number is. Well, he said, all you have to do is testify that it's the typewriter. So I said, I had, fuck you. At the trial, they asked me, blah, blah, and they said, is this the typewriter that you borrowed from Colonel Abel? And I said, I don't know. It looks like a lot of typewriters. It's a Remington portable. I have no idea if it's them. And he said, well, can you identify it? Is it something that you know? I said, no, I have no idea. It could be. Can't say no definitively. And then that was it. Then the defense attorney, in order to establish something called the credibility of the defendant, asked me a couple of questions, one of which was, do you have some sense of honesty of the defendant? And I said, I think I remember something about, you know, he's absolutely unblemished. I mean, his word was virtual, what do I call it? Biblical, okay? And so that's all. The defense asked me that question, something else I can't remember, and they said, you're excused. But the whole thing is encapsulated in just, first of all, the clumsiness of the officialdom in getting me back and forth. Secondarily, refusing to transport my wife. Thirdly, not telling me what I was going to testify. They could have asked me, can you identify the typewriter? I said, no. So you'd save money and we'd save more of the anguish going back and forth.
Brilliant.
And the final thing is, I became very anxious about entering the court and seeing Abel in the witness table. And all kinds of contrary feelings flooded me. So I didn't even look at him when I got on the witness stand. And they said, can you identify Colonel Abel? And I pointed, I said, I know where he's sitting. he said he's over at the witness table, and I didn't look up. And when I was finished testimony, they said, "You're excused." And I got down from the stand, and I looked over at Abel, and he nodded to me. That was all, just a nod. And I nodded back and left. And it was, there was something that I still almost choke up about, that's a kind of awareness that I was there to help him in some way, out of friendship, not out of treachery to the country. And that it was okay. You know, whatever I had said was okay. So that's a long expository for that moment that I think, again, is about the nature of that relationship.
Yeah. You painted a great picture of the courtroom there as well. You know, that's really useful testimony from you there. I'm interested to know what was your father-in-law's reaction to discovering that you were friends with a super spy?
I think that was mostly just like he's a schmuck. He doesn't know what he's doing, see? So he runs into people. It's a kind of innocence, yeah. Look, since I
who on earth is his daughter married?
From the start, they weren't very happy because, like all parents of that generation, maybe only because they're Jewish parents, I have no idea. They had a very careful view about anybody in the arts, that it was precarious, that you couldn't care for your wife, so, which is very paternalistic because my wife turned out to be, ex-wife, turned out to be a psychologist and very independent on her own and very capable of caring for herself. So it was the kind of traditional view of marriage, that the husband was the caretaker and supporter, economic backbone of the family. And then, you got to realize, this is the 1950s. That's 70 years ago. We're going back to almost a kind of primitive time when you think about it. The way social attitudes have improved, have changed for the better, have made lives very different. Just the number of women, for example, who now are more visible in the public space, whether they're writers or reporters or commentators on TV, and not just selling some commercial product, and not just pretty faces. There's a lot of important stuff. Writers, women writers, and women painters and artists. It's just a dramatically improved, can I say, world in which one half of the population has been allowed to function, and very challengingly too. It's challenging for men, and it's a good thing too. Competition in the arts has always been useful. At the risk of offending you, when you ask about Willie and his accent, you see, when I hear you speak, I say, I could almost never tell you, I say, at the risk of recording you, I would say that this is not relevant. Did I approximate a local accent at all?
Yeah, sort of.
That's only sort of, right? Okay, but that's not the way he spoke, you see. So when you ask me about what he sounded like, it wasn't with a kind of deaf ear that I couldn't discriminate accent or quality. Or if you spoke about somebody with a rather distinguished or preliminary accent, something which is upper class, it would be with clipped vowels and or consonants.
Yeah. Whereas he rolled his vowels, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because I'm from the south of England, so my accent will be very different. Well,
from the
it's
north.
Much,
yeah.
So my wife's accent is completely different because she comes from Manchester. So yeah, and my kids have picked up the local accent, so they always think that I sound posh. So I can't win. I can never win.
Okay.
Let's talk about your visit to Moscow in 1967.
Okay. Now, I was talked into going by two people, by the author, Louise, who felt that it was important for the book and so on, and that if I was committed to helping her in researching and writing it, that this would be an important component. And secondarily, my own curiosity, and maybe because I wanted to make up for something, that I deserted him in prison. And in reading about the way people at the prison thought about him and everything else, and he had this job of publishing greeting cards for them and so on. And the other thing is too the connection he had with Morton Sobel, who was part of the Rosenberg thing. But anyway, back to Moscow and the trip. So I went with a great deal of trepidation. First of all, I didn't know what the hell the Soviets were going to be really up to. How jealous were they? It was the same year as the 60th anniversary of the Great Revolution, okay? Of the Bolshevik takeover. And they were preparing a huge celebration. And being paranoid themselves, they didn't want anybody doing anything to ruffle that whole experience. So here are these two sort of innocents coming into looking for Willie. What were they up to? Were they a CIA plot? And so I carried with me all my brochures showing my professional status as a painter. So really somebody. And Louise had all kinds of stuff, graduation certificates, nonsense stuff. We started out, the publisher, Simon & Schuster, and they had apparently made some effort to connect with the Novosti Soviet Bureau agency, news agency, to say they were interested in coming into the Colonel. Could they provide access to them? They were appreciated as a publishing outfit. And we were told fine, that Novosti knew we were coming, and they'd be happy to assist us if it were possible. The fixer, I don't remember his name. Just a minute.
Is it Louis?
Yes. He was the fixer. He would leak information that the Soviets wanted to get to the West. So he had a very dubious role. People in counterintelligence thought he was a dubious source because of that, and so on. But that he would be able to provide the information. So the day after we landed, went to this National Hotel, which we discovered was supposed to be the international kind of exchange for spy stories and spookeries and contacts and so on. So we went to the Novosti people the next day, and Moscow is apparently huge. So their maps look very close, like, we just go from here to here. And the distance turned out to be enormous. We're walking, and where was, okay, that taking, but I had spent about 2 weeks trying to learn some Russian from a woman who was living in the same building I was in, that would be able to give me some feel of the language. And the only thing I remembered saying was something in Russian, which is "Mnie panarushki, mnie panamai parushki," which translated is, "I don't know how to speak Russian." So whenever somebody talked to me in Russian, and he said "Mnie panamai parushki," they kept talking and saying, "Oh, he understands how to speak." Anyway, it was useless, but it was only good for reading the subway stops on the subway station, which again I took pictures of, which were remarkable, huge archways and beautiful interiors that were like showcases for communism. Anyway, we got to the Doy People, and we got this incredible runaround. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have the information. Or maybe so-and-so knows he's replaced the former director. Maybe he knows, and he came and he shuffles through papers. He said, "I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you're here." So we figured, oh, that's great. This is a runaround now that they really don't want us to have any contact with Willie. So, okay, we thought we'd go to our second source. And he turned out to be incredibly full of bluster and pretentiousness and everything else. I kept promising, "Oh, well, I think we can do this," or it's, "Yes, no, Willie, called him Abel, Colonel Abel, is in Moscow, and yes, we think it can be arranged," and so on. And they would invite me out to their dasha, which is their summer home, to have this interaction. And I said, "Oh, that's neat. We're going to find out what the summer homes actually look like," because he was supposed to be on a different level in the hierarchy of the Soviet Union, clearly. And that we'd finally have this concept. Well, because of some strange moment of letdown, because we were never talking to, we were at the hotel bar for like every night, and there was all kinds of conversation back and forth, who we were, what we're doing there, and so on. And some English businessman became very friendly with Louise, and she started talking about how we were in this mission to meet with Colonel Abel. And this guy had a friend at one of the news agencies. It may have been with the BBC, I'm not certain. And he told them about this couple were here to be, to interview the colonel, they're writing a book, and so on. And then what's-his-face got news of it. And when I got on the phone with him to say whether we're going to go to the dasha now to meet him, he exploded. He said, "Why did you tell anybody? I was supposed to keep a secret, and you put me in danger," and went on and on and on. I had no idea what had happened. And then it came out that this guy had broken this little story, which shows you how weirdly introverted the whole social information experience was. It was like, and in fact, there were other news agencies in Moscow. And I remember going to the toilet to take a leak, and there was another guy next to me, and he identified himself as somebody from the AP or something like that. And he looked up, he said, I hear you're here to interview the colonel. And I grunted, I said, "Yeah, everybody knows." So the next thing out of his mouth was weird. He said, "Was the colonel Jewish?" And I said, "How the fuck would I know?" And he said, "Well, you would have seen him urinating. You could have seen if he was circumcised, right?" And I said to myself, "Oh, Lordy, I thought the news agencies were really full of fools," and that was that. But that was an insane encounter. I'm telling you, the world was made unreal because of kind of heightened paranoia about intrigue and spies and so on. It's all of the usual contacts, twisted and turned out, ulterior motives, things that seem real or not real, and so on. And in fact, I even invented a kind of code where I would be able to send a message back to the publisher that if there was something dangerous happening, I would say, I'm running out of yellow paint. That would be a code, you see, so there was danger. I mean, absurd.
I understand you left a letter for Emil.
Yes. And
what
the letter,
what did that say?
Essentially, I said what I said before, that I apologized for not writing to him. And I said something to the effect that maybe this attempt to meet you is to make up for that, to somehow whether remedy what seems like a failure on my part. And I just said, to the extent that we've been frustrated in trying to see you, I remember writing something about, I thought we could take a trip to the Hermitage, and talk about art. And I ended with, maybe another time when we can meet just as friends. I said, I don't even know if you're going to get this letter, but in the hope that you do, I'm writing because of that. And it was mailed off to the Novus Dei. I guess you remember who it was mailed to. And that was it. That was the end of it. We came back, and I think after that, I did some run around to Keene, New Hampshire, to try to find what happened to Hay Hanen. And I was going to sort of hesitantly get a byline with the book, but the publisher decided it would be better with a single author. And I agreed. I didn't feel terribly troubled by that. I thought whatever the book would accomplish in the way of correcting the record, and I think it did. I think it was, in retrospect, it was a lot better than I had thought originally. And I think she did a good job, a first-rate job. I don't know where she got some of the dialogue from, some of the conversations between the lawyers or between Willie and his lawyers, but I assume the publisher fact-checked it and her sources. So that's where we're on. That was the end, I thought.
Yeah. You mentioned the box Willie made for your as a wedding present, I think, for your.
Yeah. Do you want to see it? I have it.
I'd love to see it. I was going to ask if you still got it, so I'd love to see it.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you can see the etched.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what happened is I think through, and all these hinges came apart because the little nails that were in there, this 50 years old, but the hinges are also, where's your camera on you? Here. See, they're little etched hinges as well.
Wow.
And on the front, also, again, it's slightly corroded, but it has a little emblem with flowers etched into it. Okay.
Wow.
And in the inside, you can't even see that. There's a little plaque which says, to Helen and Burton from Emil. And it's a little kind of, But you see, the box itself is beautifully made,
Yeah.
and whatever the joinings are, so on a seal. The fact that the hinges came out, I think, happened over time. But there's a little clasp here that closes it. Little clasp in front.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. If you'd like to see video of the box that Willie made for Burt, then go to coldwarconversations.com/donate and select the monthly or annual support option. In addition to extra content like this, you'll also get ad-free episodes and more. That's an incredible seeing, that gift that he made for you.
Well, I wouldn't give it up. It's a mark of who he was, how much he cared. Without being spending a lot of money on something, some expenses, and it's personal. He gave part of himself to that. I don't buy greeting cards. I make them because I know it's important to all of them, because it's something that took time and energy, and sometimes they're really funny, and they all appreciate it in a way that this box is like that. So that's the Willie Fisher story.
Burt, I'm really appreciative of your time. You've been so generous with me, and it's incredible speaking to somebody who knew Willie, and you showing me those pictures, those paintings yesterday, and to see the box today. I wasn't expecting that. That was a real nice surprise to see something that was made by the man himself, and that he gave to you, his friend, as a token of your friendship, and to celebrate that first marriage.
Well, it's what's interesting is that little metal plate inside is so terse. It reminds me of that nod from him in the courtroom, in a way. It's to Helen and Burt from Emma. I mean, it's like the condensation of everything that is a felt expression, something real, in a world full of unrealities, and certainly this whole story is unreal, clearly.
Don't miss the episode extras such as videos, photos and other content. Just look for the link in the podcast information. The podcast wouldn't exist without the generous support of our financial supporters, and I'd like to thank one and all of them for keeping the podcast on the road. The Cold War conversation continues in our Facebook discussion group. Just search for Cold War Conversations in Facebook. Thanks very much for listening, and see you next week.